Okay, good morning and welcome to Just Daf It, the Daf Yomi led by the one, the only, Vincion Lang. Today we're going to be discussing Yevamos Peizayin, number 87. We're going to start with a new Mishnah, and also on Amud Beis we're going to start a new Perek. In the first Mishnah we're going to be talking about the last Mishnah of this Perek, or the ninth Perek. We're going to be talking about a woman who marries, she gets potpourri of husbands. She's married to a Kohen, a Levi, Yisrael, things like that. Interesting cases. And the next parak, what is it called? There's a couple of prakim call this in Yevamos. Her husband went away on business, and lo and behold, she thinks he died. And then she goes and she marries somebody else. And to her great chagrin, her husband from overseas, from the Bahamas, has returned from a business trip. He didn't get murdered in the Bahamas. So, I don't know if murder is prevalent in the Bahamas, but just making up a case. And he's back, and she's married to somebody else, and she had a kid with the other guy. Oh no, the kids are moms there. Lots of problems over here. Talking about getting married. You need aidas to get married. Aid echad, we paskin is good enough. One aid testifying that your husband died is good enough to get remarried, but it carries certain repercussions, and it's better to get two aidim to say that he died, and to get a stamp from Beis Din that allows you to remarry. We'll see if you only rely on one aid. There's certain repercussions that you suffer if the husband is actually alive and returns. So that is very interesting stuff and very practical stuff. A lot of times the husband goes away and he doesn't know where he went. I mean, this is more prevalent during the war and things like that. World War II, when husbands, they didn't write their wives a get. Some wrote their wives a get before they left. They didn't write their wives a get, and they don't know where they are. Maybe they relocated somewhere. They survived the war, located some country, and that's called an aguna. The woman is an aguna. She's stuck. She can't remarry. A woman can't be married to two men at the same time. All right, let's get into the Mishnah here on the bottom. Pevav Beis Bas Yisrael, Shanises LaKohen, the daughter of Yisrael. She marries a Kohen. Great, she gets to eat now. Truma Tochal Truma gets to eat Truma. Whether she gets to eat Chadz V'Shok, that's going to be a discussion of Ben Sion. Not going to want to miss that. Mace V'Lahimanu Ben, he dies. The Kohen dies, and she has a child with him. I think even a daughter would qualify. Tochal V'Truma, she can still eat Truma. Nises Levi. Then again, she goes and marries a Levi. She wants to marry different types of people. Tochal b'maiser, she could eat maiser on account of being married to a Levi. Meaning, even in Israel, according to our mayor, there's an Isser to eat maiser if you're not a Levi. But according to the Rabbanan, even in Israel could eat maiser. But the chiddush is that she is entitled to maiser. Meis v'lahimanu ben, she dies, but she has a son from the Levi. Tochal b'maiser, she can eat maiser. Now, she can't eat truma anymore once she marries a Levi, because her ikr marriage is now to the Levi. She might have a child from the Kohen. She loses her privilege to eat truma because she's now married to the Levi. He says to Israel, and then she goes and marries a third husband. Lo tocha lo b'truma l'maiser. She loses all her status, even though she has children both from the Kohen and the Levi. She can't eat on account of them because her ikr life is now married to the Israel. Meis v'layimanu ben. She died, and now she has a son from him. Lo sochal lo b'truma lo maiser. Even if he's dead, the Israel, but she has a child from him, that's her immediate child is the one she's just married to the guy. Meis b'nam Israel. Then her son died from the Israel. Tochal maiser should go back to eating maiser, not the truma maiser. Meis b'nam Levi, and then her son from the Levi died. Tochal b'truma. She can go back to the truma. Meis b'nam Kohen. Now she was the daughter of Israel, so the daughter, the son from the Kohen died. She goes back to being a regular Israeli. She can't eat Shumar Meiser. That's the first case of the mission. Now let's go to the second case. Top of Pezayim and Aleph. Bas Kohen, Shanises to Israel, the daughter of a Kohen that got married. The opposite case. She's the daughter of a Kohen married to Israel. She can't eat Truma. She loses her rights to eat Truma. Meis v'lahi manu ben. She dies, and she has a child from him. Lo sochal b'truma. She can't eat truma on account of the son. She can't go back to her father's house. And these days, the Levi, then she goes and marries a Levi. Tochel Meiser. She went up in status a little bit. She could eat Meiser now. Meis v'lai mano ben. He died, but they have a son or a daughter. Tochel b'Meiser. Could eat Meiser. And he says the Kohen, and she goes and marries a Kohen. She Bas Kohen married a Kohen. Bin ve'agefen, bin ve'agefen. Like the Gemara says himself. Tochel b'Truma. She could eat Truma. She's allowed to. Meis v'lai mano ben. He died, and she has a son. Tochel b'Truma. She could still eat Truma, because that's her most immediate family, her latest husband. Meis benami Kohen, and the son from the Kohen died. Lo stocha b'truma, she can't eat truma. She can eat meiser. Meis benami Levi, lo stocha meiser. She can't eat meiser anymore. Meis benami Yisrael. If that happens, she loses all her children. Terribly, all her children. But now Choseres the Beis Avia. She can still go back to her father's house. She was originally the daughter of a Kohen. Valzenem or V'shavel Beis Avia k'nureh melachem avia tocha. She could eat from the sustenance from the bread of her father. The bread of her father includes a lot of truma. She could eat as part of her family of truma, or maybe just she could eat on account of the fact that her father has a lot of sustenance, most of his parnassus from truma, so a kula on the father to feed his daughter truma, as opposed to before she left his house. Maybe she could eat as mishpachas kuna. We'll talk more about that. We've talked about these in Yanim. We'll talk more about that in Ben Sion. The Gemara says Meis benami Levi, right? In the first case in the Mishnah, her son from the Levi died. Tochel b'truma. She could, the Bas Yisrael, now could eat Truma, right? She married a Kohen, then a Levi in Israel. And then they all died, all the sons died, and then she's left with just the son of the Kohen. She can return to eating Truma. The Hadra Achla, Mishum B'nah. How do you know she could still eat because of her son, even though she lost the ability when she married the Levi and then she married the Israel? Minol, and Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav, Bas, Ubas. It says the word Avav before the word Bas, Ubas Kohen. Vav is extra. Come on, Rabbi Akiva. So the Gemara says it's only according to Akiva. Darish Vavi. He says an extra Vav is superfluous in the Torah. It's roy to make a drush from that. The Rabbanan disagree with that. The Gemara says Rabbanan. Even the Rabbanan would agree from the learning from this pasuk. Kula ubas kra yisayirhu. The whole word ubas. Like it didn't have to say ubas kohen. It could have just said a kohenes. Ubas kohen, or didn't have to say. Didn't have to say the word ubas. It's unnecessary. So therefore, even the Rabbanan would agree it's an extra drasha. She goes back to her father's house. When she was in her father's house growing up, she could eat the meat, the steak from his korban that he got, the shok, the asabuku, nice piece of meat from the thigh of the animal, maybe the kneecap. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Ravina Bar Shela Mikra. What's the pasuk? Hiba Chumas Hakachim Lo Socha. Says she can't eat the Chumas Hakachim. Muram in Hakachim Lo Socha. The things that were separated from the Kachim Lo Socha. What's the separated thing from the Kachim? So at a korban, the whole korban is kodesh. The things that were separated and given to the kohen, the chazan and shok. Rav Nachman Amar Rav Ravua, a different pasuk. Milechem velo kol lechem. It says milechem with a mem. She could eat some of his lechem, some of his food, not all of it. Prat the chazan v'shok. Chazan v'shok can't eat maskil. Rami Rachama ima prat the hafaras and dar. Maybe it has nothing to do with chazan v'shok. She could eat. She could return the chazan v'shok, but she can't return that her father has no ability to annul her nedarim. Amar Rava kfar paskatan Rabbi Shmuel. You don't need it from there. Rabbi Shmuel taught it someone else. Rabbi Shmuel v'neder almana v'grusha yakum Allah. If an almana or a grusha, she's married to a man or she's widowed from a man, and her neder wasn't annulled by her husband, so it remains forever. Matam alomer v'elo. The matam will not. You could maybe be matter the neder. You can't annul it. Matam alomer. What's the pasuk? V'alo mutza mikal av mutza mikal bal. It's obvious if she was fully married to the guy, she's not related to the husband anymore. She's completely out of trust with the father. We're talking about before they got married. The father handed over to the emissaries of the Baal, or the shluchei handed the emissaries of the father handed off to the emissaries of the Baal. This is a transference when she's going to the chuppah. She's going into the rishus of the Baal. But it's Armon is Garsha. At that point, right before she went into the chuppah, but she was handed over from the rishus of the father. Nisarmel and his Garsha, her husband died, or would-be husband died, or he divorced her. I still can't call the father house. Shozu, a base of Baila shows I can't call her. She's not in the father's house. She's not in the husband's house. Once she leaves the Rishus of the father, 1 second, even then already he can't be made for the Nedarim. So we already know the father, once he even gives her over to the emissaries of the husband, he loses his ability to make for Nedarim. So you already know that from somewhere else. So therefore, the pasuk must be talking about to exclude her from the chaz of a shok. Rav Rav Sauer says a different pasuk. Melechem avia tocha lechem v'lo basar. It says bread only, wheat products. Truma is usually from the wheat. V'lo basar, meat is excluded. Rav Abba Amar melechem avia tocha lechem akonoi laavia. Only the lechem because it belongs to the father. Technically, korbanos don't really belong to the father. They're just invited to eat at Hashem's table. You're invited to eat at Hashem's table, right? Royalty, the royalty of Hashem. You don't own that. It's a schus to eat it. So therefore, she doesn't get the chaz of a shok. Rav Amar, a different pasuk. They should eat it. Your sons and daughters should eat the chaz of a shok. Itcha, when they're with you. When she returns to your house, she's not considered with you anymore. She's not part of your mishpacha, because the reason is when she got married to the Israel, and they got married to Koningsberg, that's the last name. She doesn't, normally a woman, her husband dies, she doesn't take a new last name. She doesn't go back to her father's house. She doesn't take back her previous last name of Cohn, right? She remains with Koningsberg, and that's it. She's the Israelis. Her father is obligated to support her because she has no one else to take care of her, but she can't get the chaz of a shok. We'll explain that more in Yud Ben Sion. Amar Ravad Barava Tana Kishik Chazeres Bezavik Chazeres Shun Chazeres Chaz of Shok Bishvil Benach Chazeres Af Chaz of Shok. But if she has a son from a Kohen, doesn't mean not exactly Chazeres, meaning she could still eat the chaz. Well, this is interesting. It's a very interesting lashon of this Gemara. Bishvil Benach Chazeres Af Chaz of Shok. Right? What do you mean? When she was married to the Kohen, technically she should be able to eat chaz of a shok. It seems in this Gemara over here, a big chiddush over here, that while she's just married, or she's konoi to her husband, who's a Kohen, she can't eat chaz of a shok until she has a child. I'll have to explain that more. Azar of Mordechai, Amar l'shmaisa kamei de Rav Ashi, Mordechai told this teaching of her Rav Ashi, Amar mehecha kamas Rabia. Where do we know this from? That on account of her son, she gets to eat. Mi ubas. The extra word ubas. She comes to include. She gets chaz v'shok on account of her son. Mi adifal amina. Right? So the Gemara says, is she better? She has a son. Her husband died. Is it better than going back to her father's house? The Gemara says, hasu ksivi meuti. Hacha lo ksivi meuti. There, when she returns to her father's house, to the Kohen, or Mishpachas Kohen, after her husband, the Israel, died, and her son, it says miyutim, that she only gets the bread and not the chaz of a shok. Here there's no miyutim, therefore she's married to the Kohen. The Israeli is married to the Kohen. She could eat the chaz of a shok on account of her son. Bas Kohen Shnisa is the Israel. Tan Rabbanan, B'shavel Beis Avia. This Gemara is a little confusing, just to preface this. Tan Rabbanan, B'shavel Beis Avia, Prat L'shomer as Yevamos. She returns to her father's house. Meaning, if she's a Bas Kohen and she gets married to Yisrael, she's Chozeres Beis Avia. But if she's still waiting Yibum, I mean, her husband died, Yisrael died, and he has a brother, and they have children, and the brother's waiting to do Yibum with her, she can't go back to her father's house yet until he does Chalitza. Kinurea, Prat L'muberes. It says, Kinurea, like her youth, it comes to exclude Muberes. If she has pregnant from her Yisrael husband, we don't allow her to go back. And if she has a viable child, she's not allowed to go back. Hello, Dinu. The Gemara says, logical, why do you need a pasuk? Technically, if a woman's married to a man, right, and they have a child, right, and then he dies, right, so she's not subject to Yibum Chalitza, they had a child, then she goes and marries his brother, and they die without children, she still is chayav and yibum to the third brother, because we don't reckon the child from the first marriage as a child from the second marriage. Asa uber ki yolud. When it comes to yibum, we make an uber. We learned before that if she's pregnant, it's yolud, meaning she's not. If she has, if she's pregnant, it paters her min achalitza min hayibum technically. Midaraisa, she's pater. If she's pregnant, it's like we assume she has a child, and therefore she's not subject to yibum chalitza from his brother. Midoraisa, Makom Sha'asav Lamin Rishon Lamin Hasheni. When it comes to Truma, the Postam and Truma, right? If she was married to two people, and right, the second one was a Kohen, let's say, but she still had a child from the Levi or the Israel, the first one she was married to. So therefore, it apostles her. So Vlad min Arish and Vlad min Hashem, the Postam and Truma. I mean, she had a child remaining from someone who's not a Kohen. So therefore, it passes from the Truma. And then Shanasta Uber Kiyolid. Certainly by Truma, we should say that Uber Kiyolid, that if she's pregnant, we treat it like the child is already born already. And therefore, it's pashut that she can't go back to her father's house. We need a miyah to tell me that she's pregnant, she can't go back to her father's house. We treat it like he's yolad, like he's born. The Gemara says, "Lo, ma'ali asa uber kiyolad in yibum." Now you can't make a comparison. When it comes to yibum, we consider midoraisa. She's muberes. It's like she had a child. She's not subject to midoraisa chalisa and yibum. Yibum sharei asa mesim kechayim. There by yibum, there's a special halacha that, let's say, she had a child from the first husband, so therefore she's part of the chalisa and yibum. And then after she goes and marries somebody else, which she's allowed to do, then the son dies. We don't make her do chalitza again. We don't say, oh, now she has no child, bein ein-la, so she has to do chalitza from the brother to remain married to the new husband. Nasa uber kiyolid. We're not going to make an uber kiyolid, linyan truma, shaloas amesim gechayim. Second. So Mali Asa Uber Kiyol Inyan Yubam Shas Amesim Gechayim. That makes sense over there because we don't treat a dead person like a live person. So therefore we make an Uber like a Yol. Inyan Truma Shalas Amesim Gechayim. By Truma, if technically the son dies at any point, she loses her rights to eat Truma. Tamalom Kirurea probably Muberes. Therefore you need Kirurea to tell me that a Muberes you need it to tell me Muberes. We can't learn from Yibum that Muberes is like Yolad. Here also Muberes is like Yolad in terms of she can't go back to her father's house. Itzrach l'michtav Muberes. Itzrach l'michtav zera ein-la. He says two things. One is that she's Muberes. We learn from this pasuk Kinu Reha L'Prala Muberes, that she's pregnant and she can't go back to her father's house. And also zera ein-la teaches me that only she can go back to her father's house if she has no children. If she has children, it implies that she can't go back to her house. Because the Rahman of Zera Ein-la, if it just says Zera Ein-la, Mikara Chad Gufa of Hashta Trey Gufa, that's because originally when she married the Israel, she was one body. Now she's her and her son. Avamu Beres, the Mikara Chad Gufa of Hashta Chad Gufa, when she's pregnant, she's still only one child. The fetus is not considered another body. Ema Teichel, she can go back to her father. Sricha, that's why he says Muberes, she can go back. Because the Rahman of Muberes, she says Muberes, the Mikara Gufa, originally when she left her father's house, Gufa Shreka of Hashta Gufa Malia. There she can go back because she was a skinny person, an empty person. Now she's a full person. She has a fullness to her with a big stomach. Al zera ein-la, the mikara gufa sreika, hasha gufa sreika. She has a child. The child was already born already, right? Maybe she could go back to her father's house, and we disregard the child because she's the same as when she left her father's house. She was empty, and now she's still empty. Sricha, she doesn't go back. Amar lay, we're skipping the mnemonic over here. Amar lay Rav Yehuda daskrata la Rava, lo nasa meisim kechayim linyan yibum mikava chomer. We should make. I'm trying to offer a different logic to compare yibum and truma over here. Lo nasa meisim kechayim linyan yibum. Shouldn't we make that dead people should be like live people? Linyan yibum mikava chomer, from a kava chomer, meaning what? That if the child eventually dies. Meaning we shouldn't make Mesim Kechayim in Yibum Kavachor. Makom Sha'asav La Min Arishon Kovla Min Hasheni Leposa Min Truma. When it comes to a child from the first one, the first husband is not treated as a child from the second husband, and therefore she has a child from the first husband who is a Yisrael or a Levi. So even though now she's married to a Kohen, it would pass her from the Truma. Loasa Mesim Kechayim. There we don't make Mesim Kechayim. Meaning if she doesn't have a child, she goes back to her father's house. Makom shalasa Vlad min Arishon, Vlad min Hasheni. When it comes to Yil and Potra min Ayibam, right, that case again where she's married to two people, two brothers. The first one she had a child, the second one she didn't have a child. She still is subject to Yibam for the third brother. Certainly, we should say from a Kalva Chomer. that we shouldn't make Mesim Kechayim. Meaning we shouldn't say that if he dies, he dies. You should need chalitza. It's like they didn't have any children. You need chalitza after she's married to another man. We don't say that. We don't say this kal v'chomer because it's not pleasant. The Torah. It's not pleasant. The Torah would do such a thing because she married somebody else. She was patrim and chalitza and a yibam. She married somebody else, and now she finds out that there's no children from the first one. She's chayav and yibam, and then you're going to make another man, the brother of the first husband, come and do chalitza. It's not a pleasant thing for another man to get involved with a married woman's life and have to do chalitza. It's embarrassing. V'nasa mesim kechayim. So the Gemara has a different argument. V'nasa mesim kechayim l'inyan truma kal v'chomer. Let's make mesim kechayim by truma, meaning even if the child dies, we'll assume the child's alive and she can't go back to her father's house. Kivla min hasheni. When it comes to Yibam, again, that case where the child from the first husband doesn't make has any effect on the second one, if she has no child on the second one, she's subject to Yibam Chalitza from the third brother. Asa Mesim Gechayim, it Mesim, dead people, like because of Darachei Noam, are considered like live people. The child always exists, even if it dies, the child dies. And she when it comes to Truma, where we always reckon that previous child, if there's a child from a Levi or Yisrael, it passes her from eating from the Kohen and Truma. Certainly, when it comes to Truma, we should make Mesim like Chayim, and therefore, even if the child dies, she can't go back to her father's house. It says, and the restriction from going back to her father's house is that she has. She's allowed to go back to her father's house. She has no children, and she has no children. She doesn't have any children, so that's the Metzius. So therefore, it's different than halacha by Truma. So then, where's a different argument? Let's make when it comes to Yibam, that weird case where she's married to one brother, they had children. The second brother, they didn't have children. Let's count the child of the first one and pater from Chalitza Yibam to the third brother. From a kal come to Truma, where we don't treat Mesim like Chayim. When she goes back to her father's house, we do reckon a child from the first marriage. The pastor when it comes to Yibam, we treat dead people like live people. And we should reckon also the first child. It says Yibam is depending on whether she now has a child from him. She doesn't have a child from the second husband, she's subject to Yibam and Chalitza. So now we have a final argument. Let's make, when it comes to Truma, a child she has from the first husband, we shouldn't reckon the child. Now she's married to a Kohen. Even though she has a ben from Yisrael or Levi, it shouldn't pass over any Truma. When it comes to Yibam, we treat dead children like live children. We don't reckon the first child, and therefore she's subject to Yibam Chalitza if she had no children from the second husband. Come to Truma, we don't reckon dead people like live people. Since she has no children alive, she can go back to her father's house. And also should be by Truma. We shouldn't reckon the first child, and she should be able to eat Truma with her new husband, the Kohen. It says by Truma, whether she has no children, but if she has children, it already passes her, and she can't be married to the Kohen because she has a child from the Yisrael. Hadron alakesh mutaros. With only 3 daf, it was pretty easy parak. Let's go on to the 10th parak. Aisha shalach ba'il l'mdinas hayam. I said hadron alakesh mutar. Okay. Aisha shalach ba'il l'mdinas hayam. I was younger. I used to be makbid when I finished the parak. I used to say hadron 3 times. I think it was based on the fact that when you make a siyum on the masech, you say hadron. You repeat the first paragraph 3 times. I used to do makbid hadron mutar 3 times. So I'm not sure if I said the first time. At least 2 times. It got rove. All right. The woman, her husband went overseas. He went to India. He went to China for business purposes. We'll see. It's 2 people or 1 people. They said to her, either 1-8 or 2-8 said, your husband died. We witnessed your husband dying. Benisesh, based on the 8, she went ahead and married another man. Her husband comes, he's alive. Oh no, she can't be married to anyone anymore. She's considered a sota. She's also her husband and to the bola, to the one she's with, committed adultery with. The sricha get mizem. She needs a get from both of them. Right? Technically, she was only married. She couldn't be married to the second one. For the first one, she needs a get. We don't allow them to be married because it was an isser. Right? We're talking about where she got married. I'll be 8 echad, and technically, she's allowed to get married. 8 echad halacha is, but there's repercussions. Like the Gemara says, the reason we allow her to marry an 8 echad because we made a chumrah. If you're wrong and you relied on 1-8, and it turned out your husband was still alive, we have all these punishments listed in the Mishnah. So therefore, they allowed her to find out and trust that 1-8 because she knows there's going to be repercussions. So obviously, daiko mitzvah, she's going to try to find out properly whether her husband actually died or not, and that's why we're allowed to rely on 1-8 over here. So let's say he actually came back. She needs a get from the first one because she was married to him. The second one, she doesn't need a get. She was never married to him, right? She's adultery is chayve krisos and is no havaya. She couldn't be married to the second one. She needs a get midrabanan. People assume she's married to the second one. She doesn't get a ksuba, the mano masayim, and maybe the son barzel. She doesn't get the payros. Don't go to the husband, and she doesn't get the reward for giving the payros to him, the perkona, the being able to ransom. Velo mizonos, she doesn't get food. Velo blows, she doesn't get the worn out clothing that she gave to her husband. Lo zeh, neither husband. If she takes any of these things from him, she has to return it. Avad mamzer mizeh. From the second husband, we know that she was a mamzer. She's not even married to him. But the first, if she continues to live with the first husband against the wishes of Chazal, it's a mamzer midrabanan because she's sota midrabanan. She's not a sota vadai that committed adultery. She honestly thought he was dead, but she's a sota vadai. They made her sota vadai, and they midrabanan. She's not even married to him, and therefore it's a mamzer midrabanan. V'lo zeh v'zeh metamila. Neither husband, the one who came back from the Yasiyam, or the new one she married, not obligated. If they're a Kohen, they're not going to matame for her because the other Kohen doesn't matame only if it's his wife. The second one, it's not his wife. The first one is his wife. We'll see why he can't matame her. She dies. The husband also is penalized. He doesn't get. Normally, a husband gets whatever she finds. It belongs to him. And if she makes her work, her salary belongs to the husband. He doesn't get the ability to annul her nedarim. These are schosim that a husband normally gets. He loses them, both husbands. If she was a daughter of Yisrael, she becomes a zona. She becomes possible to marry a kahuna. If she's a daughter of a Levi, she becomes, even though she can't get meiser anymore, even though normally a daughter of a Levi could get meiser, she's not entitled to get the monetary compensation of meiser because she's a zona midrabanan. But they penalize her. Bas kohen min truma. Daughter of Kohen, she also loses out on going back to her father's house to get truma. We'll see what this means. We just said before, there ain't no ksuva. What does it mean? They don't yorish the ksuva. We'll have to explain later on in the Gemara. If these husbands, each of these husbands died, there's no. Both of the brothers of the two husbands, they would do chalitza and not yibum. The second husband can't do yibum or chalitza because he's not married to them, but they required a chalitza midrabanan. And the first husband, we don't allow to do yibum as a penalty. The chalitza is midaraisa. You need to do a chalitza. We have a series of Tanaim who argue on one or more of the clauses of the first part of the Mishnah. Yossi says ksuvasa nilsei ba'ala rishon. Yossi says no, that she does get a ksuva from her first husband. Lezer Omer Harishon Zakai Mitziyasa. Lezer argues and says the first one, you penalize her, you don't penalize the husband, therefore he gets whatever she found or produced, and he gets to annul her vows. Rishon Omer Biyasa Chalitzasa Me'achav Shal Rishon B'Ter Sarasa. Rishon actually allows even the Chachila to do Yivim Chalitza, the first brothers. We don't penalize the brothers, and that's effective Chalitza Midaraisa, the pot of the Saras The Ein Havlad Mamzer. This obviously from the Sheni is a Mamzer. The Frishon we don't call a Sota Derabanan to make it a Mamzer. When he says Shalom Rishus Muteras Lachzor Lo, if she got married without permission, meaning this is talking about a case where she got married based on two Eidim. She got two Eidim, said the husband died. You don't have to get. It's better to get Rishus from Basin, but you don't technically have to get Rishus from Basin. Only if one Eid you have to go to Basin and get an informal stamp of approval. Muteras Lachzor Lo, two Eidim came. She's allowed to go back to him. We don't penalize her. She's only a Sota Midarabana. We don't penalize her. And he says, I'll be based in. Tatesei, if she got married, I'll be based in, meaning one aid. Tatesei, she has to get married, like the Mishnah said. Optura min a korban. She's exempt from being a korban, korban chatas, right? It was unintentional what she did. She was Boel, the second one, the second husband. She was an Isha. She Boel, the second husband. She's Potter in a chatas because she got a header from based in. Loni still be based in. She didn't get married to the header of based in. She got married based on the testimony of two Eidim. Tatesei, she has to get divorced, obviously. The Chayeves B'Korban, she's Chayev a Korban because she didn't ask based in. And there's only a tour of a Korban. If a Yachid got a heter from a based in, then they're Potter, it says in Bamidbar, she's Potter from Korban Chatas. Here she didn't get a heter from based in, so therefore she's Chayev in the Korban. Yavakach, based in, Shaboshim in a Korban, even though it's only one aid, if she gets a stamp of approval on based in, it's better that it exempts her from the Korban Chatas. Haru based in Linase. Let's say based in allowed her to get on P the Eid Echad, allowed her to get married. She went and acted immorally. She was together with another man out of wedlock. Chayev is b'korban. And then she's chayev in a korban when her husband returns. She no longer has the tour of a based in giving her a heter because they only allow her to get married. They don't allow her to act immorally with somebody else. The Gemara says, "Mintani seifa nisei shelo b'rshus muteres la'asor lo." Shelo b'rshus based in ela be'edim. The end of the Mishnah says that she didn't get married with Rishus, meaning she got married based on two Eidim. She can go back to him. Shalo Rishus based in Ela Eidim. Obviously, it means that she allowed herself to get married based on two Eidim. The Reisha Rishus based in. The Reisha, the whole beginning of the Mishnah was talking about based on the allowance of a base, and she got a psak base she could get married. And she relied on the header of one aid. Alma Eid Echad Neman. We see the concept from the Torah from the Mishnah. Eid Echad is technically believed. We're going to discuss the Raisa, the Rabbanu, Sanami. We have another Mishnah. Hoxikul Yos Mesin Eid Mipi Eid by Eid As Isha. Not only do they allow Eid Echad, they also allowed Eid Mipi Eid. Normally Eid Mipi Eid hearsay when one aid tells another aid what he saw. That's hearsay. To trust the second aid, you don't believe that in normal Eidos. Here we allowed it, Isha and Isha. And normally Isha is Ptul Eidos. Here they allowed not only a woman, but also hearsay from two women, Isha and Evet, Shifcha. Normally Evet or Shifcha are possible from Eidos. We allowed an Isha and Evet Kani or Shifcha Kanius, Eid with P8, and both of them, they're all believed. Alma Eid Echad Mehem, it's not Nami. Another Mishnah says, Eid Echad Omer Achalta Chaylev. The one aid tells you, by mistake, you ate Chaylev. Forbidden fats. He denies. He said, I know I didn't eat it. Potter. He's exempt from a korban because you can't bring a korban. You deny it. It's hachasha. You deny the claim of his. You ruin his edus. And ein mevin chul nazar. You don't want to bring chul nazar when you're not having a korban. Time with the amar lo achal. He's only because he was makish him, because he disputed him. Hi ishtik. If he was quiet, mehem, the first aid we believe alma yidach mehem the raisa. So we see that one aid is Nemi the Raisa to be Chayav someone a korban chatas. We'll get more into this tomorrow about the nature of Eid Echad. It's very fundamental stuff in Shas. Not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned for you, man. See you on coming up right now.